Hello, everyone. Now that I'm back to making regular content, um, I've wanted to make more videos focusing more on natural theology in particular, like the existence of God, defending those arguments for the existence of God, um, refuting atheistic and naturalistic philosophies, things like that, which is really how this channel got started in the first place. Um, And the reason for that is, since over the course of years, feel like I've matured a bit intellectually in terms of how to best answer atheistic and naturalistic visions of the world. So in this video, I want to basically make the point that if you're going to truly offer successful proofs for the existence of God in a way that leaves no possible room, gives no quarter for an alternate postulate for the world's existence and contingency, then you really have to concede, in my view, the metaphysical insight of St. Thomas Aquinas, specifically on this whole issue of the distinction between essence and existence, which he understands to be a real distinction. But before we go into that, if you like my content, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you like what I do, hit the bell to get a notification when I go live, um, and also consider joining my Patreon if you want to support what I do. You basically get unlimited Q&A access, monthly book recommendations, monthly articles, exclusive streams, video requests, things like that. So if that's of interest to you, definitely consider supporting me through Patreon. It really does help out a lot. So anyway, on to the topic of this video, and what I want to clarify up front here is what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that all arguments for God's existence that don't explicitly appeal to this distinction between essence and existence are unsound or worthless. I mean, if that was the case, I would have to be committed to the view that all but one of St. Thomas's existent arguments for God's existence fail in some way or are inadequate. Um, so I do believe that you can demonstrate the existence of a singular cause of the world without necessarily having to appeal to the real distinction between essence and existence. But what I do want to maintain is that without recourse to this distinction, I'm not so sure that you can thoroughly establish what is most characteristically divine about the first cause. Take, for example, the argument for motion as articulated by St. Thomas himself. Now, this argument essentially shows that reductions of potency to act from potentiality to actuality, they can't go on indefinitely, basically. And so we have to arrive at a first mover of all things who is pure act itself. But in order to truly arrive at what is most characteristically divine about pure act, um, you basically have to um, arrive at a discussion about the act of all acts, namely the act of existence. Pure act itself can really only get us to a source of the world's motion, but it can't really get us to the source of the world's existence. If all we can really do is arrive at an unmovable source of all change. And so, now it is, of course, true that God is the immutable source of the world's change, but um, that is not what is most characteristically divine about him. It's not really what makes God God at the end of the day. If we are truly to arrive at a non contingent ground of all contingency, then we really have to articulate some way in which not only the world's change is unaccounted for without recourse to the unmoved mover, but we have to articulate a way in which the world's fundamental existence is unaccounted for without recourse to a first cause of all things. And specifically, a first cause of all things at the level of their very existence. So, in other words, we have to prove that the world has no existential inertia, no existential steam on its own, but that its continued existence is thoroughly derivative. It's thoroughly borrowed, in other words. And Aristotle never really got this far. So if we don't plunge into these metaphysical depths, my argument really, and St. Thomas argues it as well, is that the furthest you can really get to this metaphysical ultimacy that we're talking about would really be on a categorical level, nothing more than what would be considered the highest strata of angelic being. And St. Thomas himself makes this point specifically in arguing for the real distinction between essence and existence when he says in the De Ente et Essentia, he says, quote, everything that pertains to a thing, however, either is caused by the principles of its own nature, as risibility in man, or else comes from some extrinsic principle, as light in the air from the influence of the sun. Now, it cannot be that the existence itself is caused by the very form or quiddity of a thing. So he's talking about the essence of a thing. Because then the thing would be its own efficient cause, and the thing would produce itself in existence, which is impossible. That's one of his arguments for the real distinction. Um, Therefore, everything the existence of which is other than its own nature has existence from another. And since everything that is through another is reduced to that which is through itself as to a first cause, there is something that is the cause of existence in all things, in that this thing is existence only. Otherwise, we would have to go on to infinity in causes, for everything that is not existence alone has a cause of its existence, as we said above. It is clear, therefore, that the intelligences, so the angels, are form or essence and existence, and have existence from the first being, which is existence alone, and this first cause is God. Now, one thing I find interesting about this argument for God's existence that he's putting forth there is that he's really making it within the context of trying to show how it is exactly that angelic existence. He's trying to show how it is that angelic existence is to be truly and fundamentally distinguished from divine existence. So he's trying to get at what is most characteristically divine about God, and in so doing, showing how you would properly distinguish between angelic existence and divine existence. And he does so through his real distinction between essence and existence. Because what you have in the angel is still a composite. In this case, it's a composite of act and potency, but applied specifically to the distinction between the angel's essence and act of existence. Since it is a spiritual creature, so it's going to lack that act potency composite of form and matter, which is the case in all other created things. And funnily enough, without St. Thomas's real distinction between essence and existence at play here, I actually would find the possible existence of pure subsistent forms or angels to be an atheist's best friend, since you would need to find some other way in which each and every angel would still remain metaphysically composite and therefore would be unable to account for its own existence. It's not in virtual particles, it would be in subsistent forms. That would be the only alternative to God in this case. But thanks to the real distinction between essence and existence, even pure forms are composite, and therefore contingent beings. The reason is that they remain composites of what they are on the one hand, and this higher principle of actuality on the other that accounts for their actual presence in reality, their existential presence in reality. And once you concede that distinction, given St. Thomas's argument above, you can finally arrive at a reality that breaks the otherwise infinite regress of existential causes, without which you would only have essences that do not contain within themselves the principle of their own actuality. The whole of the cosmos would be reduced to non-being because they don't exist by virtue of what they are. Um, the reason is that what they are answers a fundamentally different question from its actual existence. And that's the basis of that real distinction between essence and existence. And another reason for that distinction is that, um, because some might say, well, can't existence be a part of a thing's essence? And so you don't really need a real distinction between essence and existence. Well, the reason why that doesn't really work is that existence and its very concept is always going to presuppose the quiddity of what exists. It's always going to be presuppose the whatness of what exists, in other words. It presupposes the whole essence that may or may not exist. It's because the essence is the potency that may or may not be an act in this case. So essence stands in potency to its act of existence, requiring us, therefore, to arrive at a reality, the essence of which is none other than the pure act of existence alone, in and through whom all things live and move and have their being. You can see how this distinction then completes and perfects all the other cosmological arguments for God's existence. This distinction, for example, is the most ultimate and foundational distinction between act and potency, and therefore it completes the first way, that argument for motion. And furthermore, this principle of the act of existence is also the most ultimate kind of efficient causes, and so it also completes the second way. And the conclusion of that argument, namely pure subsistent existence, in other words, God as the pure subsisting act of existence itself, is also the most necessary kind of being whose necessity is not derived from any higher principle. And so it also completes the third way. And it is this principle of subsistent existence itself that is the conclusion of this argument that is rooted in the distinction between essence and existence that lays the foundation for the rest of the characteristically divine attributes, which you find in other videos of mine. And I explain it in depth there. It is this unity of essence and existence in God that forms the ontological basis, for example, for his simplicity, his infinity, his perfection, even intelligence and volition. And while, as I say, you can check out my other content to get a more detailed explanation of that, it is ultimately because existence is the act of all acts. That's the foundational principle here. That is what ontologically grounds the rest of the divine attributes. Even substance and form stand in potency to the act of existence, and so it precedes all manners of being and is the most ultimate of all the perfections. Because nothing can take on any perfection at all if it doesn't, in the first place, exist. And so that is why what is most characteristically divine about God is that he is esse tantum, nothing but existence, nothing but esse. And you can only really fundamentally get at that conclusion if you arrive at it through the real distinction between essence and existence. Because what that distinction allows us to do is it allows us to identify this root of all created perfection in existence. It enables us to identify that in limited and finite modes. And upon recognizing its limited modes, we can therefore construct an argument to get us to a source of those limited modes of the act of existence in creation, leading us back to the first cause of all things. Existence gets at the fundamental root of all reality, that act of existence. As I was saying, it's more ultimate, it's more fundamental than form, substance, I mean, those are very fundamental metaphysical principles, and that's the kind of the bottom level of Aristotle's metaphysics. But there's something even deeper than that, and you can only carve it out through this real distinction between essence and existence, which allows us to treat the act of existence along the same lines as we treat form and matter, as composites of actuality and potentiality. And once we've done that, then you can just follow the same train of logic in every other argument for God's existence, namely breaking the infinite chain to get at he who is none other than the subsistent act of existence itself. So if you like this video, give it a like. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was somewhat understandable. Um, if you have any questions, you can leave a comment, of course, and I'll try to get to it. But what I'm really kind of just trying to do is to get at the importance of St. Thomas's unique metaphysical insight in natural theology, that all these cosmological arguments for God's existence are helped uniquely by this real distinction between essence and existence. I think it is the most important metaphysical principle to get right if you're going to make the most successful arguments for God's existence that you can do. Um, so yeah, if you like this video, give it a like, consider joining my Patreon, um, and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to get a notification when I go live or upload a video, and God bless.